Well, hello. Welcome, Deer Talk Now listeners and viewers. Today we're going off script. David Gilane, executive producer extraordinaire, Deer and Deer Hunting TV and all things DDH video, is with me today. And this is going to be unfamiliar for me. David says I have to go unscripted. But we're going to talk about all things deer and deer hunting. Especially David's introduction into deer hunting.
Right.
So you start, David.
Yeah, well, first off...
You tell me what we're talking about.
Well, first off, Dan, podcasts are all unscripted, or at least they should be.
They should be?
Yeah.
They shouldn't be.
You know what? If I'm listening to a podcast, you know, I think you can tell when somebody's kind of got like an outline and whatnot versus like you listen to Rogan, obviously the number one in the world, and the guy just talks about whatever. So that's kind of what I'm here for, right?
Well, you're the guiding light.
Right.
You're the guiding light. But I do have to give an introduction. Okay, so you started with us 5 years ago?
Yeah, 2017.
Was it 17?
Mm-hmm.
2017, and that was kind of a weird time. We were still in the corporate world back then. But what people might not know about you is you came from, okay, I'm Wisconsin podunk, true and true. Lived here my entire life. Traveled the country, but, you know, lived here my whole life. You came from basically, I know not proper city, but Los Angeles area.
Yeah. I primarily grew up out there in Southern California and Ontario. I kind of nomaded my way back to the Midwest. I was born in Wisconsin, but I was moved out when I was really young. And in 2008, you graduate and you look at the economy and yeah, right? So like my parents lost their house, they lost their business, they lost everything. And naturally, the only job I could get was, slinging pizza for, $8 under the table, which at least that part was good. But, not a whole lot of ambition. So I just decided, like, I'm going to Google what the best economy in the U.S. at the moment is. And Omaha, Nebraska popped up. So I ended up moving to Council Bluffs, Iowa, a little bit after graduation. And, yeah, bought a little car with the only $300 I had and got a roommate off of Craigslist for like $200 a month. And then I worked my way up from there.
That's amazing. I know your story, but it still amazes me because when I met you, okay, so the biggest thing is you had the technical experience already. You're pretty young coming out here, but you had the technical experience for video, which is what we needed. Mm-hmm. And we were probably, I'm trying to remember, we were only a couple years, we were about 5 or 6 years into the whole online video thing, which nobody was doing,
right,
in the hunting side at all. And I'm like, okay, here we go. I dealt with it before, but what I hadn't dealt with is, you had completely fresh eyes as far as, I remember the first hunt we went to Wyoming. Mm-hmm. We were into Wyoming. I shot an antelope doe.
Yeah.
And I think you were more excited than I was.
Well, it was my first hunt ever filming, at all, period. And you gave me, you gave me a 1 square foot window of the ground blind to film over my shoulder out of. And it also happened to be the window that you were shooting your crossbow out of. So it was an incredibly tough shot to get. So I honestly, I don't think I've had a more difficult shot since then.
Didn't you free-handed that one too, didn't you?
Yeah, I didn't have a choice. There's no way to get a tripod in there, so.
Free-handed it and you got it, and it all started there.
Yeah.
So tell us, what was your thought process coming out here and taking this job?
Yeah, well, I didn't really have one.
I mean, but what were you thinking, like I'm filming guys killing stuff?
Honestly, I had, I'll take you back a little bit. So, I had never hunted in my entire life prior to this, growing up in Southern California, you dodge bullets more than you shoot them. And, I grew up a complete movie nerd. I still am, right? I wanted to be Steven Spielberg. And it never occurred to me, even going through college, that producing TV was an option not only in the Midwest, but that there was even a hunting industry, right? I didn't know it existed. So when I applied for the job, I was at a point in my life where, again, I was kind of at a pivotal moment where I decided just throw my hands up, put out job applications all over the world and start anew somewhere. And I think you guys just had like video producer as the title. And it was Iola, Wisconsin. And I had some roots just an hour northwest here from Iola. And so I said, you know what? I'm not expecting much because I looked at Iola. It's like population 900.
Yep.
And I applied for it. The description was a little vague. It didn't say you're a hunting television producer. It didn't say you'll be dealing with dead animals. I think probably for good reason it didn't say that, too descriptively. But I got a phone call from Scott Roeder.
He's our HR director.
HR guy back at FW, and he was kind of dancing around it on the phone at first. He's like, "So, have you ever hunted before? Like, what's he was trying to get like my opinion of hunting, because there's so many different opinions nowadays that are very strong." And I was like, "Well, I mean, I got Wisconsin roots. My dad was a hunter growing up, but personally, I was moved away from it. So it's something that I've always kind of like been in the back of my mind, like not even consciously in the back of my mind most of my life. But I'm definitely not opposed to it." And then he asked me, well, how do you feel about, filming like dead animals? I'm like, well, my current job right now, I was working at a college. I'm constantly filming like surgical videos on dead cadaver heads, and those are human beings, so I was pretty used to like formaldehyde smell and stuff, so naturally I was like, yeah, absolutely, I don't mind it at all. let's give it a go. And so
that is the thing that I always think about, because we talk about it every day, is that you coming from that environment, I mean, you did musicals and plays and stuff like that, and it was an urban existence. But, what worked out well for you is you not only took to it with a passion, but there was, if you look at America, for the most part, anybody my age or older, and I'll even knock that down a little bit, I would say anybody 40 and older probably has somebody in their family history who was a farmer of some sort. And that has been kind of slowly like pasteurized out of society. And hunting is kind of the same way. Now, had you not had, I'm sure your dad talked about it. Oh yeah, I used to deer hunt.
Yeah, I talked about missing it.
But had that not been in the equation, would there have been that much of a, I mean, had you not had a Wisconsin connection, had you not had a dad who hunted when he was young, do you think that still would have clicked for you?
I mean, yes and no. I think it depends, like, was anti-hunting pushed in you as a young kid? Because if so, then maybe not. But at the end of the day, as long as, like, a bias isn't instilled in you at young, then I believe that there's actually a hunter in everybody, because it's our nature, right? You go back to the beginning of humanity, we hunted from day one. So any creature for that matter. So I think that, yes, there's a little bit of it that's intriguing to just about anybody that you talk to, if they're truly being honest with themselves. But, nowadays so much bias is just thrown into people's minds at a young age that, we are the enemy. And luckily, I didn't have that.
Did you have friends that had that? Like, when they found out you were coming to do this? Like, oh, my God, what?
No. I mean, not that I know of. Again, I went to the University of Iowa, and so undoubtedly, I probably had hunters as friends, but it wasn't something that was ever really brought up. I'm sure they, growing up in Council Bluffs and the surrounding rural Iowa areas. I'm sure they hunted plenty.
Yeah.
But,
That was a difference. I mean, it wasn't like you
Yeah.
went to UCLA or something and it was like,
right,
oh my God, it was like liberal central,
right,
where nobody would have been like, I can't believe you're going to do that,
right.
and we see that today. So let's talk about that a little bit. Okay, you did write the article about your dad, which is kind of cool. He hadn't hunted in decades, and then you took him hunting here last fall.
Right.
Let's talk about that for a little bit because I know that was pretty special.
Yeah, I mean, how many people get to, reintroduce a parent or a grandparent to hunting after decades of not hunting? Most of it's the other way around, right? You get to introduce your child. But me, growing up again in Southern California and never getting to go out to the woods with my dad, I start that article off by saying my very first memory of hunting was when I was 3 years old, watching my brother and sister get to go out for their first sit ever, and I was too young, so I was just sitting there crying, holding my mom's leg, like, why can't I go? And then we moved after that. So to be able to, bring my dad back into it after decades of living out in the city in Cali, that was pretty special thing to do. And, he... I think he got a little overzealous at first. He's got that old timer, like, oh, I'm just out here for a buck kind of mentality. And I mean, you can probably relate. You and him grew up in the same area.
Mm-hmm.
He's used to going out into the woods, sitting literally at the base of a tree stump and with a single shot shotgun and taking literally whatever shot presents itself. So his stories, I don't think would make for like good TV nowadays.
Yeah.
Just because people would tear him apart.
For him, this was like, what, 25, 30 years removed?
It had
Maybe
to
more?
have been, I mean, he hunted like once as an adult, maybe 20 years ago when he was visiting Wisconsin. But prior to that, he hadn't actually killed a deer since he was 17 years old.
Wow.
So we're talking like 30 plus years.
And I know
30.
you captured it all. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a doe. We got a fat doe.
Yeah.
And he was just...
With a crossbow.
With a crossbow, his first ever crossbow kill. And, as soon as first off, he took a shot I wasn't too excited about. She was quartering too, but she dipped perfectly into it.
Weren't you saying something like, wait?
I was literally whispering to him, wait for a broadside shot, wait for a broadside. And then he cuts me off and just thwack, there goes the arrow. And I'm just like, oh, I hope she's down. I heard her crash, so she was down. It was a good shot, regardless of the angle of the deer.
And now your folks live back here, and he's gonna basically like be, in his 60s now.
Yeah.
Basically reinvigorated to hunt.
Yeah. So a cool little side story about when I got this job. Like, the process of me getting this job was pretty extensive, and ballsy, might I suggest. But my whole family at the time lived in California when I was applying for this job. And I know that, because of the politics, because of the economy, because of everything going on out there, they were dying to get out. And I came up here, not for the interview. I came up here just to, okay, here we go. So the whole thing started because I was in a relationship back in Omaha, and it ended. I will say this because I think it's hilarious now. She actually ended up like hooking up with a coworker who was teaching her karate in his basement.
Oh, okay.
Like that. It was pretty sad at the time, but you look back and it's like, who ends a relationship like that? Anyways, so long story short, I was gifted some tickets to a Bill O'Reilly showing in Omaha. And that was my last gift ever from her. So what I did was I, thought, who in my life would love to see Bill O'Reilly? My dad. So I called him up. He's in Cali. I said, look, you buy a plane ticket. You can come out here and you can see Bill O'Reilly with me. And so he did that, and we went to go see the show. And at the end of the show, my dad's like, Legend Lake, Wisconsin is only about 8.5 hours. If we leave right now, we can be there by morning and see your grandparents. So I was like, all right, let's do it. So we drove through the entire night. I drove through the entire night. And
Had you met them before?
Who?
Your grandparents.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean.
No, I just thought, okay.
I was in Wisconsin until I was 7, and then there was visiting back and forth.
Okay.
And so we got to Legend Lake in the morning, and we took a little nap once we got there. And then we started walking around the lake, me and my dad, and just right down the street from my grandparents on the lake that my dad, grew up vacationing at was a house for sale. And this house was like half constructed. It was like it was $175,000 listed as. And, it's right on the bay. And it overlooks the entire lake, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And my dad calls my mom, and he's like, Vera, this is our chance, And without hesitation, and to my surprise, my mom's just like, let's do it. Let's get out. Let's do it now. So they put their house on the market in Cali. I think they get like $400,000 or something.
Which,
like that
it's like insane out there.
Yeah, and the house is nowhere near the size of the house that they're in now. And they pay cash for the house that they're in now. And they moved out here they actually moved out here the weekend that I came to interview for this job. So it all just kind of started coming together. And as you know, when I came out here interviewing for this job, I told my current boss that I was going to Wisconsin on Friday. I needed to take Friday off. I told her that I was going to Wisconsin to help my parents unload their U-Haul, which wasn't entirely untrue because I did help them do that. I just omitted the fact that I was also coming to interview for a new job. And she actually denied that request and told me if I go, I'm fired.
Really?
Yeah.
So did she know, probably?
I think she might have guessed it because, just based off of my, the last couple of months of the rest of my life kind of falling apart, I think that, I probably displayed some level of unhappiness at the job. But, I mean, as an employer, you could probably guess when people's feet are halfway out the door. And at the time, I'm 26 years old, and that was like my second real job. So I wasn't quite yet, to the point where I'm like...
I don't remember this part of the story.
Yeah, well, long story short, she fires me because I leave, And I leave. I drive, 9 hours to Legend Lake the next day. And then from Legend Lake, the very next day, I come all the way to Iola, which is about an hour and a half drive. And I come and I interview with you, and I interview with Scott Roeder. And you guys seem to like me, but then you're like, well, you still gotta meet Terry. Okay, well, where's Terry? Well, he lives in Minnesota.
That's right.
Okay.
Terry Boder.
Yeah. So,
great TV producer. He was a TV producer before David.
He taught me. He got me in the game. He taught me everything.
Terry is awesome. Love Terry. He produced DDH TV. If you guys remember, Terry came in. I can't remember. It was about I don't know. It was several years before David got here. But anyways, okay, so that's right. And I remember that. I remember Roeder coming into my office saying, this guy's going to drive here. I'm like, cool, impressive, because there's more story there. But anyways, so then you had to drive out to Minnesota from here, which is 4 hours.
Actually, we met in Eau Claire.
That's
right. He was generous enough to drive an hour into Wisconsin, and it was only a 3-hour drive for me to Eau Claire. I made it like my way back to Omaha kind of thing so that it wasn't too crazy. So yeah, that was the next day. So the next day then I drive all the way to Eau Claire. I meet with Terry. We have a burger, some beer. He makes sure I'm not like crazy, I guess. And I go back to Omaha without an answer. And naturally at that point, I'm like freaking out because I don't have a job. I decided to give up my apartment because I thought I was going to move one way or another. So I moved in with my best friend Ryan and his 5 kids. And yeah, I was just kind of sitting around for like 2 weeks waiting on a call. And eventually it did come. So
it got there, and we got you here, and we're happy. We've done a lot of great things together the last 5 years. Man. All right, let's take a break to thank one of our sponsors. Today's episode of Deer Talk Now is brought to you by Walkers and the new FireMax Digital Shooting Muff. Featuring all new digital omnidirectional microphones, the FireMax features a slim, low-profile design with rubberized finish. A high-performance digital audio circuit delivers blazing fast reaction time and the muff's rechargeable USB is good for a charge of up to 150 hours of battery life. FireMax also has a full dynamic range HD speaker for clear and balanced sounds. I love these muffs because it's not just a muff that you wear when you're shooting. You can hear everything. It's got noise canceling, the highest technology in hearing protection. When it comes to your hearing, protect it or lose it with Walkers. For more information, check them out at walkersgameear.com. I want to dwell on the cultural aspects, though, a little bit. We're kind of preaching to the choir because everybody who's listening to this is a deer hunter or really into it. But what is the culture in California? I mean, I'm just fascinated by it. What is are we all just a bunch of, coon-ass rednecks living out here that we somehow don't get the modern culture world or something?
No. I mean, you've got a bunch of, and I say this in quotations, coon-ass rednecks in Cali too, right? So Cali, I would say, is the ultimate melting pot of the country, maybe apart from like New York, the bigger metro areas. But Cali, obviously I care a lot about that state. It's where I grew up. I got a lot of love for it, but at the same time, I will never go back and I will never want to raise a family there just because it's so crazy. But culturally, I think it actually did me a favor because when you grow up in such a melting pot, you learn how to get along with all the different cultures, right? Whereas when I first moved to the Midwest, I used a little bit of like racial banter towards myself as a joke to some of the first people I met out here, and they just looked at me like absolutely like flabbergasted. They were like, how dare you point out that you're part Mexican? Like, well, I am. What's the problem with pointing it out, And in Cali, that's what you grow up learning to do is not ignore the differences like I think, we're kind of being told to do nowadays, but rather embrace your differences, acknowledge them, and, through friendly banter, through, whatever means, just get along by understanding that we are different. So Cali, if nothing else, and obviously my musical background, that made me a lot of who I was, a lot of who I am, and my director back then. But that entire culture of growing up in that arena, I think everybody would be serviced by, even just to get a little taste of that, to experience that type of lifestyle rather than, and there's nothing wrong with just living a small town Wisconsin life, but just getting a taste of it.
It's a good point.
Would open up your mind quite a bit, I think.
It's a good point. And I got in a kind of a parallel situation. I got it through working in the corporate world because when we had to go to New York City, when we had to go to, Cincinnati, or we had to go to Colorado, we had to deal with, it was kind of the same thing. Like when you said it was melting pot and you're dealing with, especially that company, that corporation, you know what it was. I mean, we were 5% of the portfolio.
Right.
And everybody else hated us. So, I mean, I shouldn't say that, but it was not hated us. It was like they had to understand where we're coming from. We had to understand where they're coming from.
I mean, we're walking through the hallways with crossbows and guns, and you've got like arts and crafts people just looking over their shoulder.
Who have never experienced. This is a funny story, and you've heard it, but we had a president of the company. It was several of iterations of that corporation, but okay, so for those of you who don't know, deer and deer hunting used to be owned by a large, it was hedge fund owners and stuff from New York City. Anyways, we're in these budget meetings, and the guy's name was Bill Reed, and he was from Cincinnati, but I don't think he'd ever left the cities. And we were trying to explain to him, because we had Gun Digest, we had Deer and Deer Hunting, we had these outdoor titles, and he said, we're trying to explain. He didn't know anything about guns. He just knew guns were evil,
Oh, yeah.
And we were trying to explain. Jim Schlender brought this up. He goes, well, you have handguns, and you have long guns, and you have wait. lawn guns? They have guns that come out of your lawn? I mean, that was the
That bad, huh?
that was the mentality. But anyways, I digress.
Yeah, it's like semi-auto versus auto, right?
Oh God.
Every gun's an automatic.
These
gun
assault
days.
rifles. Okay, please explain to me what an assault rifle is. Well, who needs 20? Oh, yeah, it's like,
Right.
we're not going to go there.
Oh, we could, but no.
Let's talk about the other thing that we've fast forwarded to now. You've been immersed in the culture.
Mm-hmm.
You've been immersed in hunting. You've been successful. You've shot deer. You've adhered to my teachings of big or small, shoot 'em all. Killed some big axis deer. You've killed monster whitetail.
And I've killed some small ones.
And some small ones.
Yep.
You've had mistakes. You've missed. You've wounded. You've
Yep.
been through all that. Being indoctrinated on such a fast pace,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the things you see within the deer hunting community that either trouble you, puzzle you, annoy you, or piss you off?
Oh,
And I
well,
know that's going to open this up.
yeah.
Can of
So
worms.
we can. I'll preface this by saying I'm an incredibly honest human being. So if I piss you off, I'm not sorry. So obviously, going straight into it, right? I was super excited. I get to finally try out hunting. I know my dad did it. I know my grandpa did it. I remember when I was a kid seeing a deer, hanging in my grandpa's tree and upside down, gutted. And I was so fascinated by it. So as an adult, super excited by the idea of it. And I kind of feel like, I was absolutely blessed to land with this outfit specifically because of the way that you taught me how to hunt, right? Big or small, shoot 'em all, be absolutely happy and pass on that type of mentality generation to generation as much as you can. But naturally, there are quite a few things in the hunting industry, not just the hunting industry, the hunting community, that almost pushed me out of the game from an actual hunting perspective after I shot and successfully recovered my first buck. There's so much pressure that this community puts on itself. I'll give you an example, right? So I shot my first buck. Super excited. It was a decent shot. I knew he was going to be dead, but he ran far enough to run onto my neighbor's land. I did the right thing. Before I blood trailed out there, I called my neighbor, and his initial response to me when I told him I just shot my first buck, he ran on your land, can I go look for him? He said, well, we're trying to shoot him big out here. I didn't know what to say. I was just like, it's my first buck. Like, there was 3 of them standing in front of me, and I shot the biggest one that was there. He's like, well, okay. Yeah, you can go look for him. And it's like...
So what, you think he was just jealous or annoyed?
I don't think he was jealous. I think that it's just the... I mean, we'll not dance around what I think is probably the biggest problem, right? It's QDM, right? And it's not that QDM is a negative thing, right? To me, it's a lot like, I use this metaphor, maybe I use it incorrectly because I'm not that educated on it, but it's a lot like, teachers' unions, right? They were created to do a good thing, to protect teachers, to make sure that work environments are good, that people can grow, and you see the metaphor here. But at the end of the day, when you give an institution or an idea righteousness, what does it do? It has too much power, and then it starts to try to tell everybody else that that's what you need to do as well. And it gets corrupt, right? Because human beings are the ones that are implementing it. So, especially in small town Wisconsin, when you've got every single parcel owned by somebody else, and they all have a different method of how they want to hunt. 5 of them are on board with QDM. The other 4 are like, no, I'm going to shoot whatever the hell I want. All you get is bickering neighbors, and you get people pressuring each other. I've got a couple neighbors who will say to your face, being a neighbor is the most important thing in the world to me. I just want us to get along, and I just want you to be happy shooting whatever you want to shoot. But then they'll go and they'll talk behind your back and say, well, hey, look, you see the mounts in his house? He does nothing but shoot 2-year-olds and blah, 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 blah. So being a complete newcomer and witnessing all of that, it doesn't exactly make me want to be a part of it, So as you know, when I shot my first buck, I put this I wrote a 1,000-page post or 1,000-word post. That was, it damn near went viral for just being posted on my own page, basically just saying, I don't care, So yeah, there's a lot of good, as you know, because this brand in part, or in large part, is responsible for bringing QDM to the Midwest. Right.
Charlie Alsheimer.
Yeah, Charlie Alsheimer and Al Hofacker was his name.
No, well, Al was excuse me.
He had it in New York or something.
Al was a founder. Charlie was a contributor from New York, but he is largely credited with popularizing QDM north of the Mason-Dixon line. It was popular in Texas. It was popular in the South. Long before it got up here, and then Charlie started publicizing it, and it took off, and deer and deer hunting is largely responsible for that.
Right. So at the end of the day, I feel like it just like anything that is intended to be good, if you don't stop and assess what negative aspects it may be having, then it gets out of control, and I think that it has.
And you experienced that right out of the gate. I remember it. I remember it well. You shot a 2.5-year-old buck, which most hunters, especially, like I said, older hunters, never did for years.
Right.
You did it right out of the gate.
Right.
8-pointer, I can't remember. It was...
he's an 8.
Nice buck. Probably a 14, 15-inch spread. A beautiful buck.
Proudly displayed on my wall.
Even to today, But I remember it was almost like... It was innocent, like, what the hell? Like, I can't... you came in and I'm like, I can't believe you're already experiencing this.
Well, to give an example, right? So I posted that big, long thing. And some neighbors were just like, you know what, Dave, good job, congratulations. Like, one of my neighbors is my father-in-law now, right?
Yeah.
He I am completely blessed with, because he, from the get-go, has been, look, you shoot whatever you want and you make it and you be happy about it. He's very much like you in that sense. But, for instance, a different neighbor screenshot my message and sent it to you.
That's right.
And told you that you were basically teaching me wrong.
Yep, that's right.
Like, how...
That's right. How dare you?
Sad and pathetic do you have to be sitting on your couch at home and care that much about somebody's happiness to try to, destroy it, basically.
Yeah, and I remember that now. Basically telling me, well, you have to uphold higher standards because, you work for deer and deer hunting. And I'm like, oh, please educate me on deer and deer hunting, because I've worked here for 30 years.
Right.
And it's like, you please tell me what our mantra and our mission should be.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission should be, and I've said this from the very beginning, especially when I became editor-in-chief, I said, we're all things for all deer hunters. And that rubbed people the wrong way.
Right.
Because like you said, and the corrupt part of it is, I tell you what, those guys at QDM, the QDMA, and they will watch this and they'll get pissed. I'm not trying to piss any of them off. They're my friends.
I'm just kidding.
But this is the thing was, they changed the name. It's now the National Deer Association.
Right.
But basically, well, that's not what this is. No, I know that's not what your organization is about. But you obviously don't have enough boots on the ground out there to know what's real. Because when you look at just that concept of QDM, if you are in Texas, or if you're in the least country of Alabama or Georgia, where it's like the haves and the have-nots, and that is a very stark and sharp line. And now you get to a state with 1 million deer hunters, and like where we're living in a county with 18 deer bow hunters per square mile. 18 average bow hunters per square mile. You can't do that. And then I used this analogy before. You just kind of alluded to it. It was like I grew up in the Catholic Church, and my dad always said, sorry, Dad, for telling this story. He said if you gave the ushers guns, they'd shoot somebody. Because you gave them a little bit of power. No.
Right.
No. Okay, now you can come forward. Yep, you can sit right here.
Right.
And that's how this whole thing was. You can't shoot that. You can shoot that buck right there.
Right.
It's the same concept.
Yeah. So,
You know?
I mean, at the end of the day, I think that if you're not looking at QDM as a good thing, right? It was designed to let,
Right.
the habitat flourish for all animals,
Keep
not just
population
white-tailed deer.
levels steady.
But at the end of the day, if you don't have enough land to practice it, don't expect your neighbors to. Don't try to inflict it on other people. At the end of the day, like, it's a good thing, but it only really works if you have either the participation or the land that you own to make it happen. And anything, outside of that, like, you're just ruining it for other people, basically.
And you only own what you own.
Yeah.
I think another lesson that you probably learned, maybe the hard way, is when you shot that giant buck.
Well, real quick, I'll tell you this. My father-in-law, again, bringing him up, John, his philosophy, when it comes to family, anybody he lets hunt is, you shoot what you want and be happy. But his own personal philosophy is, I only want to shoot a buck that is bigger than the last biggest buck that I've shot before. And so the day before I shot that deer, I said, John, I like that philosophy from a personal standpoint. I said, I think I might do it. And then the very next day, I shoot the biggest deer in town.
And how big was he again?
He was 153 and a half or something.
150-inch buck.
8-pointer.
8-point.
And just immediately I'm like, oh, God, I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah,
to
you're
him.
never shooting another deer for the rest of your life.
Yeah, not there at least.
Off of 3 acres.
Right. So,
Which really rubs some people the wrong way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, how many people came up to me and were like, that was only a 2-year-old, right? Well, I don't care. I'd shoot him if he looked like that as a 1-year-old.
Wrong.
Yeah.
Was not a 2-year-old. Oh, God.
I did actually have a neighbor send me trail cam photos from at least a couple years prior to that, so I know he was at minimum 4 years old.
Well, who cares?
Right.
Who frickin' cares?
Right.
Well, this is the thing, too, is would people, I know I've preached this so much that I'm blue in the face. I've done it for years and years. Would you please get off your high horse, please? For the love of God, stop with the aging stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do you do that with pheasants? Well, it was only a 2-year-old. Do you do that with? Oh, I know we do it with turkeys, but it was a Jake or a mature gobbler. That's about it. Okay, that's another thing because people are actually trying. They're trying to impress us on. Well, he's a 3-year-old. Okay, well, if you can manage a game bird that way, go right ahead and waste your time. But anyways, stop it with the aging. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's the self-importance. The self-importance where we're guilty for it because we provide the information, but it's like reading the Bible and only picking out things that you think apply to you. It's the same thing with reading Deer and Deer Hunting magazine. Well, Dan, but we're trying to manage for a representative age structure. You can't do that.
Good luck.
You can't micromanage that way. Anyways.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah. Look, you can think it's a 2-year-old all you want. At the end of the day, I say, just like live and let live, hunt and let hunt. Right. If you want to age deer for yourself, if you want to, go. I have absolutely nothing against it. Zero against it. I think it's a great thing, especially if you have over 500 acres and you can actually manage for 3, 4 and a half year deer, right? But what good does it do you? Because I know what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to guilt me or whatever. But at the end of the day, I could care less, right? Well, my favorite Ted Nugent quote: "If you're pissing off, if you're not pissing off the assholes, you're the asshole." So I make it a point every single season, every single day of my life to piss off the assholes, right? Because
and you do it unapologetically.
Oh God, yes, I did. I don't care. I may not always be the best, speaker. I may stumble every once in a while, but at the end of the day, I know what I believe in, and I do not like, I don't really like to waver on that.
Well, I like to think that I helped shape your views on that a little bit. Because,
No, you didn't.
Because
I'm
as
just kidding.
far as the hunting stuff goes, that's, in my opinion, what has ruined American deer hunting as we know it.
Right.
You know, I was always going to say QDM ruined American deer hunting as we know it, and it has to a certain level, but it's not the concept in its truest form. It's what people have made it to themselves. They have picked and choose that I'm going to only manage for mature bucks. Again, more power to you. You own what you own, and if you have your neighbors go along with you. But I've seen so many people. One of my best friends, and I'm not going to name him, very first time I met him was in 1995. And he came into our office. He knows who I'm talking about. With a big topo map and it was from the plat book with the landowners, and he had it circled. And the land that he hunts is about a square mile that was owned by a rich friend of his. And he had a circle around the 140 acres. And he goes, that guy right there. You know, that guy right there. If he could he shoots everything that comes through there. It's like, so what? You know? You own what you own. I don't know. I mean, I could go down so many reasons why I think it's like that. I think people, this is like their moment to shine, especially if you're local. Like, that's all you got.
Right.
That's all you got. So you're going to, like, whatever problems that you're trying to get out of the rest of your life, you're putting it on somebody else.
Right. I mean,
and you're setting yourself up for failure.
Again, I wasn't hunting 20, 30 years ago, but you were, and a lot of my neighbors were. And from my understanding, the way it used to be, right? Small town Wisconsin, you shoot a buck. It didn't matter what size it was. You know, you go back to school, got my buck, you know.
That was everywhere in the country, everywhere.
And you know, if you were lucky enough to get one, you throw it on the back of your truck, you take it to the local gas station or local deer camp where everybody's hanging out, which used to be my garage, apparently, back in the day. And it didn't matter. People celebrated around that deer, you know. And one of the saddest memories that I have, which was my first year here too, was a gentleman who used to hunt the land that now I live on. You know, I let him come hunt every single year still. I say, as long as you want to do it, come do it. And he only has 2 or 3 days to do it every single year. And that first year that I was there, I pulled up into my driveway after work, and he had a buck on the back of his truck. And I was like, oh my God, congratulations. This is awesome. And he's like, oh yeah, well, you know, I'm going to keep this one under wraps. I'm not gonna share it with anybody because it was a small, like 2.5-year-old basket rack, and I just sat there. I was like, you shouldn't have to do that. Yeah. You know, it should be the way it used to be, but unfortunately, it's not anymore. It's not. And that, you know, coming from my perspective, never hunting before, and that being my first year bow hunting at all, any kind of hunting at all, like, what do you think that does to somebody who wants to become a hunter? You know, who now views somebody who used to celebrate every single deer and now feels as though they have to hide it, you know, from the world. Like, I'm ashamed now that I got this deer. You know, not only is that sad, incredibly sad, but like, it's not really respecting the animal that much either.
No, it's not.
Know? So, yeah, you know, I don't really know what to think of it. I pushed through that year where I got my first buck, where I felt like I was almost going to drop out just because of all the pressure.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Right.
Did you ever get to a point where you said, screw it, I don't want to do this anymore?
Yeah, that year after I shot my first deer, just because that post that I made came with a lot of support. The support usually came in secret messages, though, right? Just they would PM me and they would say, look, I'm not going to say this publicly, but you're 100% right, and you know, I'm so thankful that you posted this because I relate 100%. The stuff that, you know, wasn't so secretive was the critique, naturally, and I'm just sitting there like, I'm trying not to read into it, but how can you not, right? How can you put in an entire year worth of picking up a bow for the very first time, practicing every single day, just to be successful and then be completely shunned by people over it. You know, like, what does that do? Like, I'm sorry, but if you're sitting there and you're preaching that, you know, hunting is dying and that people aren't becoming hunters anymore, but at the same time you're doing that, then it's your freaking fault.
It's your fault.
It's your fault.
Yeah, you're right. It's 100%.
So,
couple lessons there. Number one, obviously, we can preach to the choir, but especially any young hunters who are listening to this, enjoy the excitement, you know, revel in that moment and own it. But at the same time, try as hard as you can to not seek that validation from somebody else, because that's what we do. We're all guilty of it. We want to be validated. We want to, you know, we want to share our excitement. And what I've found is sharing your excitement normally means sharing it with your true friends and your true family, because you throw it up on social media.
Right.
You're just asking for somebody to take that softball and smack it right back in your face.
Right. And you know how difficult that is now in today's day and age, because, you know, even as a young adult, you're trained that if you are successful, where do you put it?
Oh, heck
social media. That's the new gas station. That's the
Instagram,
new
Twitter,
deer camp,
Facebook,
right?
That's
where you display it. So unfortunately, if you display the wrong deer nowadays, you get eaten alive. So in part, you know, that was another kind of element to this industry that I had to navigate, was specifically Instagram, because Instagram is very popular in the outdoors industry. And I've always had kind of mixed feelings about it. I've had to obviously partake in it because it's part of my job. I've worked with influencers who I consider friends. But Instagram is as much, you know, the problem as it can be the solution.
Yep.
So that's definitely difficult to navigate if you're a new hunter.
Yeah. Let me see what we got here. Well, let's wrap this one up. We're gonna have more. We're gonna have more with David, but and I don't even think we could scratch the surface if we sat here all day long.
No, just remember to piss off the assholes.
If you're not, I'm gonna quote David, who was quoting Ted Nugent. If you're not pissing off the assholes, you're the asshole.
Right.
And for that, we'll leave you for this week. A little bit unscripted today. For David Gilane, I am Dan Schmidt. Please bookmark this, download it, whatever you need to do, all the podcast platforms, or if you want to watch the video versions, we have them on YouTube, deeranddeerhunting.com, and elsewhere. We will see you next time on Deer Talk Now. The Deer Talk Now podcast is brought to you by CuddyLink cell cameras, up to 24 cameras, one cell plan, and as low as $10 per month. 10-point crossbows, the fastest crossbows in the world. Wildlife Research Center's Scent Killer Gold. Apply it, dry it, and go hunt. Full range hanging systems, the best way to display your shoulder mount trophies. Hunt Stand, the #1 hunting and land management app. The $1 Million Buck Bash by Apex Competitions. And Traditions Firearms. Feel the difference.